Welcome to episode 93 of the XRM Toolcast. In this episode, Scott and I speak with Nathan Helgren, a senior program manager at Microsoft working on virtual tables. We discuss everything on virtual tables, from where they began to where they are now, especially over the holidays. A whole slew of new features were released, so if you've used it before and you don't even know about the new stuff, you may want to check into that again. I will give you a full warning, though. It was virtually impossible to not have dad jokes this episode, so there are quite a few in those in there. So hopefully, if you're looking just for virtual tables, not dad jokes, you can forgive us in that. But if you're looking for virtual tables and dad jokes, this is definitely the episode for you. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XRM Toolcast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scotty Clean Nose Duro. Scotty, how's it going? Scotty's name is
very good. That it kind of implies that my nose was not clean.
Yeah, that wasn't quite the case, was it?
No. It was your nose. I mean, you're just detracting away from your nose by talking about my nose. I mean, I feel. I mean,
if I can get everyone to look over here, they won't be over here. Yes,
we've all had something on our noses at some point, and someone's trying to point it out like this, but then you ever get to that point where you start to sort of do this and you scratch, and then someone goes, "Ooh," and then have I got something on my face or my nose, and they scratch, and then you go, "Oh, maybe they're trying to indicate that I've got something on my face," and then it kind of escalates from there. So you're kind of like everyone's furiously kind of trying to clear their face of various bits of debris, and
Yes.
We've all been there.
I had that experience in college. I was trying to shave right before class started. And I cut myself, and so I'm trying to stop the bleeding with toilet paper. And so I got to get going. I'm running late, and so I run in, and the door for the classroom was at the bottom, and everybody was sitting up theater style. So everyone saw me when they came in, and immediately when I come in, the entire classroom starts laughing in the middle of the teacher, and I was like, what the heck's going on? Did I have some what they might look like a clown face with blood? I couldn't figure out what it was. I just quickly sat down, and I turned to the person next to me. Why did everyone laugh when I came in? And she's like, "Oh, the person before you couldn't get in," and she kept on trying, and the teacher had actually stopped and opened up the door for her, and you just walked in without any issues. Oh, okay, all right. I thought I was all sorts humiliated. So.
Anyway. It's demonstrating that you've clearly been scarred by the situation. You're gonna kind of recommend some kind of counseling or something.
Yeah. Yes. 16, 17 years later, it's still forefront of my mind.
It's haunting you. I mean, we could do a whole episode on people that we've had on, uncomfortable situations that people have been in. It's just a fact of life, isn't it? Early on in your life, you feel as though your life is over at some point, but then you gradually realize that it just comes with it.
Yep,
got to roll with the punches.
Yep. So we'll move on to our guest today.
I was trying to find a segue. I was trying to think of a segue.
I was wondering if you were going to have one.
Well, I know. I was trying desperately to try and think. How can I do this? But.
You could ask me about an embarrassing event in my history.
Well, there we go. Just there we go. Nathan, everybody.
Hi.
Our guest is Nathan Helgren. Usually I read your Twitter profile. I couldn't find it, so I'm just going with your.
He virtually needs no introduction.
There we go. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So you're better late than ever.
A senior program manager at Microsoft. So that's his entirety of his LinkedIn description. So it talks about hashtag Dataverse, hashtag Power Apps, and hashtag Power Platform. So yes, that's Nathan. So Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah,
welcome.
I'm happy to be here, and I guess I'm a man of few words on LinkedIn unless I'm posting something. I've been with Power Platform for about 4 years now.
Okay.
I basically focus on Dataverse, working with data model or virtual tables, things like that. But I've been at Microsoft it'll be 25 years this fall.
25 years.
Yeah, so I've been around a while, done a lot of different things.
Nothing's changed at all.
Do you have one of those big bits of glass that they give you, those kind of huge pieces of? I've seen them on Twitter and things.
Not the 25 year. I've got the 20, which is pretty big. I don't have it here with me. But the 25 it's like a rolling case that has to come in because it's ridiculously unwieldy. And so it's pretty impressive. I should be getting one of those, and then I can line them all up at the solstice when the sun hits it, and I become my true form.
Yeah, it's like some kind of laser kind of
Exactly
focuses in. So the Power Rangers-esque kind of thing going on. Wow, the imagery. Well, I mean, where do we go from here? I mean, honestly,
yeah,
it's nowhere but up. Oh, really.
It's virtually unfathomable. Yes.
Well, there we go. That's going to be a common theme, I think, throughout this whole. Yes, but we are talking about virtual tables.
Yes.
So that is your thing. So have you say you've been in the Power Platform for 4 years? I mean, have you been working on virtual tables for that whole time, or is this a?
That's a great question. I've honestly, virtual tables came in about a year and a half for me, about that timeline. So before that, I was mostly focused just on the data model. But when we get into the virtual table stuff, they needed somebody to take that over, and it kind of aligned with what I was already doing, and so I became a part of that. And so now I'm, that's a big focus. It's a big push because it's kind of an immense undertaking and really impactful. It's like people have that external data. Everybody starts with data. There's data everywhere, and so you have to get to it somehow. And virtual tables, makes that a little bit convenient, and also gives you a lot more control in the way of integration and stuff. So it's been a really interesting feature. I've really enjoyed working on it.
Now, you said before that you worked on the data model. Is that just working on the out of the box like tables / entity? Like what is working on the data model?
Yeah. I mean, it covers a lot of things. It's the tables and attributes that come out of the box. It's the relationships. It's dealing with things like, for example, custom polymorphic relationships. When I started, that's something that came out of some of the work we've done. So it's kind of like making sure that all the core structure is fully functional, and then building on top of that the relationships.
Cool.
Nice. I mean, you perhaps you could just sort of give a quick overview of what virtual tables are to anybody who's kind of not au fait with them, or maybe heard them but not really sure exactly what they are. Maybe you could just explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a virtual table in Dataverse is a representation of data that lives somewhere else, but it acts like it's in Dataverse. And some of you who may have some SQL experience are probably familiar with the concept, because SQL has virtual tables as well. But it allows you to quickly and easily, before recently it was a little bit of an effort, to create a virtual table, and that will point to a data source like SQL or SharePoint, and all of the data that's in that source in the table or the list you're using appears as part of your table in Dataverse, and it looks like it's part of Dataverse. You can make relationships with it, you can do apps on it, you do basically anything with it once it's there. And so it lets you kind of bring that external data in-house. Something that I feel is really important about that is people start with data in some locations, as I mentioned before, but that data can't always move. You might have a list of information that's in SharePoint, and you have a lot of people that are interacting with that list. Not all of those people have Power Apps. And so that list has to continue to exist where it is, but you still want to integrate that with Power Apps and use that in Power Apps. So a virtual table makes that possible, where the data is still in its original place, but you're able to have full, read, write, update access to that data and make that available to users of the apps, as well as keep it where it is for other users.
Yes, that sounds great. I mean, a lot of people ask, well, how is that different to like a connector, for example?
That's a good question. So a connector does similar work, but a connector connects to a specific data source, and you're using that direct data source. Again, if we use the SharePoint example, right? If I use a connector and connect to a list in SharePoint, I'm pulling that data in. I can use that within my form. But what I can't do is use that data with other data in the same form. So what I can do for a virtual table is I can have a table in Dataverse that I use to record inventory requests, for example. With that table, I can have a virtual table that's out of SharePoint that has my customer list. I might have my product data in SQL, and I can actually have relationships between SQL and SharePoint to Dataverse and use all three of those in a single form in an app. So I have full data accessibility and integration, whereas if you're using a direct connector, you can interact with that data, but it's much more difficult to make that data interact with other tables inside of Dataverse and do other things.
And by interact, you really mean like relate to, like, hey, this is related to this. And so that way you can see, hey, this thing has these items beneath it or whatever.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So were you on the original team that said, hey, we know devs can go and kind of make, writing some plugins, they can kind of make their own virtual table kind of stuff thing. Let's take that and let's actually make that more mainstream. Were you on that? Did you get started that early in it or not?
Actually, I came on board shortly after that. So there was a person before me who was owning it, saying, we need to simplify this. We need to make this a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
In the old days, it would take days to maybe a week or more to actually build a virtual table. You had to write plugins and certify things. It's this whole process. And so my predecessor was working on making this more accessible. And so they built what are called virtual connector providers. And the whole idea behind that is that they do a lot of the pre-work for you. The discussion on the virtual connector providers. So they came up with the idea of the virtual connector providers, which does a lot of that pre-work. So all the plugins you have to write, all the registrations and things, it takes care of some of that for you. So it cuts time out of the process. And then with that, they were able to take SQL from 2 weeks down to like 20 minutes to build a virtual table. Mm-hmm. And so when I came on board, it was shortly after that was made available to the public. And then we took it a little further and went with SharePoint as well and Excel. And those were selected mainly based on the number of virtual tables that were in use today. So we could see how many people are using what data sources. And we figured those were the most important ones. So we started working on that, and we wanted that to be easier. So we saw the process and we're like, yeah, this is better than 2 weeks, but you've got to do like 60 different clicks, and you're going to
and you have to know what each click is too, because that's my other part. I was like, wait, do I want it this way or that way? I'm not even sure. Yeah. And you have to go to like 6 different places. There was no flow. You had to look it up online and follow the directions online on how to do it. So there's no way in the system to figure it out. And so we thought, just like an infomercial, we thought there's got to be a better way. And so, we were like fumbling, everything's black and white, and then now it's all it's flowers and sunshine. But so we built the new functionality with the UI, which right inside of your table structure, you're building a table in the Maker portal, you can now choose to connect to external data, and it's about 10 clicks, and you can build a virtual table end to end for SharePoint or SQL in 2.5 minutes. And so with that, you plug away, you've got your data, and you're instantly using it in under 5 minutes. You can even build an app on top of it within that time. So you could go from opening up Dataverse to building a virtual table and having a 3-page app to play with in 5 minutes.
I remember when you first showed it to a group of MVPs, you virtually got a standing ovation. You see what I did there? Again, virtually. But yeah, I mean, it was quite remarkable, for those of us who, actually tried to go through the pain of setting it up and everything. And so you mentioned it's like SQL Server and SharePoint at the moment. So perhaps we can come on to the future in a bit, because I mean, if we wind back all the way back to the days before the virtual data providers, I mean, people that are listening, maybe one of those people that are used to shoehorn data into a plugin and just intercept the retrieve multiple and then just kind of, put your data. That was a sort of like, bare metal. And then as I mentioned, we got to the virtual data provider. But I think that for me, that the kind of the big thing that really changed was the metadata discovery aspect, where suddenly virtual tables became, it became a lot more about being able to discover metadata from external sources. Maybe you could sort of talk about how that works for people.
That's something that I've heard quite a lot of great feedback about for users, because, it's one thing to just use an open, use an OData API, pull that data in, and then you've got some data, you've got some raw data, you can do stuff with it. But being able to have that relational information, that metadata, that helps you understand the structure of that data. So when you're interacting with it, it's very, you can do all of the standard queries that you have as part of Dataverse into that data and retrieve that information and understand how it's being used and understand the properties of that data, and also kind of drive decisions you make. Like, for example, that metadata can also be used as part of Power Automate. And so, being able to provide that to people gives a very powerful type of structure that it goes beyond just making data available. It makes the data, more usable, more friendly, and for basic developers all the way up to pro developers. It kind of opens up a lot of opportunities that way.
Yeah, because it's like suddenly becomes, it doesn't really matter where your data resides. It all looks the same. And I think that's really quite special. But of course, one of the challenges I find is as soon as you open up that angle, people say, well, why do I even need Dataverse? Why can't I just have like a model-driven app built on to SQL Server? Or can't I just have everything virtual? What would your take on that be?
Well, the way that the virtual tables work, they work because you have Dataverse. So, I mean, Dataverse, the way that Dataverse actually interacts with these tables is nothing but a metadata structure. So there's actually nothing stored in Dataverse. So yes, you are referencing directly from that source. But what makes it possible to have those interactions through Power Apps and Dataverse and to work through the APIs and all that functionality is to have that as part of the Dataverse structure. Kind of the benefit there is when you look at the Power Platform as a whole, right, you've got this whole community of applications that understand how everything works together if it's part of Dataverse. If not, you can still use it. You just have to take a lot more effort at each one of those steps and make sure it understands it. It understands SQL in the Power App. It understands SQL as Power BI and understands SQL as part of an Automate. But if it's within Dataverse and even using a virtual table, it just knows how to use it. And you're just a matter of just selecting your data. You don't have to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to use that once it's in place. And that's kind of the difference there. Yeah, so a lot of people do still use and will use direct connections because that meets their needs. And because virtual tables do have the Dataverse component that's required, some folks might say, I'm not invested in Dataverse yet, and so I'm going to continue to use my connectors, and that's perfectly fine. That it meets their needs and it's what they need to do. But virtual tables does make the process easier for people who are investing in Dataverse and have data in other sources, and it makes it a little bit easier. Like another thing that we feel is a great benefit of using them is it prevents people to have to look at the possibility of migrations. Because sometimes people do a migration of data off of SQL or off of SharePoint or off of something that's into Dataverse, and that's an investment. Especially the more data you have, the more complicated it is, the longer it takes, and you can use some of the out-of-the-box tools, or you might have some custom providers that help you work through that. If you don't need to move it, if you can use it where it is, then you don't have to make that investment either. So it's really it gives a lot of great opportunity and great, power to the user to decide how they want to use their data. And makes a lot of these options available to them, but it's by no means a replacement. And I do like to tell users that I talk to a lot of MVPs, and they'll say, well, I use SQL. Why should I stop using SQL? Like, don't stop using SQL. If it works for you, it's fantastic. We love SQL. It's just a matter of use what you need, and we're going to give you tools to make it easier to use it in different ways.
When you show people Power Apps, or specifically model-driven apps, I think that's quite often there's a huge light bulb moment. People see the whole being able to build an app very, very quickly on top of a data schema and on top of all of that metadata and everything that model-driven apps gives you. How far do you think you could push virtual tables in working with a model-driven app? I mean, obviously, at one end of the spectrum, you've got a model-driven app built entirely on Dataverse. How far could you push it to be a model-driven app that's sort of built on, 80% virtual tables or 50%? What would you think the limiting factors there would be?
I've built a model-driven app entirely on virtual table. So, I'll build a virtual table. As a matter of fact, it's one of the demos that I do. So I'll go through the process of building one of these tables in 2.5 minutes. I'll go right into the table hub where it shows you, hey, here's my table. Here's all my data. I can look at it, play with it. Right at the top, there's a button to say, build an app. And if you build an app, it builds a model-driven app. And within, a minute or so, I've got a fully functional model app that's 100% on a virtual table. Now, again, the benefit is, you can start integrating that data with other sources, so it's not just pointing at that virtual table. You can go 100% virtual if you want to with the model-driven app, or you can have any other such combinations you want. I think that a lot of times the integration is the really interesting part for a lot of people, to be able to use multiple sources together. Because when you integrate with Dataverse, you can take a table that has SQL and has SharePoint, and all three of them are part of that same model-driven app with a very quick creation process, and you're able to pull all that data in. So honestly, it's kind of up to the user's imagination. You have that full functionality available to you for model-driven apps.
So what are the what are the limits? There's got to be limits associated with virtual tables. So what are the things that was a standard Dataverse table, you could do X, Y, and Z, but because it's a virtual table, you can't?
That's a great question, and honestly, you're right. Everything has limitations, right? Whenever you're making any sort of technical feature, you're going to have some things that you just can't address.
Unless you can add another layer of abstraction.
Exactly. So for virtual tables, the thing to remember is that data doesn't live natively in Dataverse. So anything that requires that data to be native is impacted. So for example, the audit functionality of Dataverse. The audit functionality built into Dataverse requires the data to be local so that it can track all the created by created and all of that value. So you can't run an audit inside of Dataverse on a virtual table. That doesn't mean you can't be running audit in SQL and SQL doing its own auditing. It's just that it won't be part of Dataverse. Rollup calculations or anything that requires a join with a virtual table. So the virtual tables don't allow joins between multiple tables. And so that's also a limitation. So, and so that's where we have issues there with things like rollup calculations and such.
So with joins with multiple tables, is that different virtual tables together, or is it you can do the Dataverse to the virtual table?
Yes, you can do Dataverse to the virtual table. It'd be different virtual tables together, or from a virtual table to a table that's not part of the virtual table. So, for example, the way to kind of think of that is like if I'm pointing at a SQL table, I build a virtual table for it, but that SQL table has another table it's related to in SQL. Unless I build virtual tables for each one of those, I can't see that data. I'm only seeing the one I'm connected to. But even from there, the joins, you can't join from a virtual table of SQL to a virtual table of SharePoint as well. So there are some limitations there, and that's why we have like the intersects that we use by putting a Dataverse table in the middle of those lookup relationships. But so there are some of those types of limitations that require native data to be present or that require joins to work fully functionally. So there are, and we actually within the documentation we put online, and I've just done an update on some of this. We do have like an outline of limitations to be aware of, and so it's not all powerful. It doesn't replace a native table, but it gives you the benefits of not having to bring everything in locally if you wanted to use it, with some limitations.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. And so we'll put the link to that in the notes for this episode. Because it's brand new, right? It's only just come out, all this new functionality to make it so easy to set up your SQL server. So somebody within a few minutes could take their SQL Server tables and create a model-driven app, and then you're ready to go. Absolutely.
The documentation you'll link to, there's some videos I put out there as well that just show you step by step what to do. And it's, people, when they see it for the first time, when they've never built a virtual table, they're like, oh, that looks really cool, I can use it. And the people who built virtual tables are like, this is amazing. There's so much less testing that has to be done. It's right at the tip of my fingers. And that's really kind of our goal, is to make that easier to use and more functional. Yes, so that UI experience, it just came out last Friday, as a matter of fact, everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it was made available in North America on the 5th of January. It's been out in a few other regions, but the official blog post is this week. And so the UI experience is there. The virtual connector providers have been out for a little longer, but so it's just a matter of making that available to people and getting people to start using the UI experience.
What about the security story, in terms of, obviously for Dataverse, we've had like role-based, record-based business.
No one cares about security, Scott. Come on.
Just give everyone an access.
We trust everyone.
Yeah. Oh dear, give everyone access, then there's no problem, right? Yeah. So,
security is a big factor. So all virtual tables today are built as organizational, and that's just the way that they're structured. That's kind of architecture. We are investigating if there are ways in the future for us to do some token authentication once they get connected from Dataverse and talk to the source to revalidate the user within the source. But right now it's just full organization based. But with that, you can actually still use the role-based security on the virtual table. So you can set up roles that have access to the virtual table itself, and then those roles can either access it or just read only or not have access at all. So you can still set up the settings that way, but you're not able to say, I've already set up all these users in SharePoint, and when they connect to it, I just want to validate it that way. that's something that we're hoping to deliver in the future. It's on our roadmap, but I don't have an exact timeline for when we do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's just always just it's going to be an all or nothing thing. I guess you either have access or you're not. Yeah.
Well, sorry, and with the roles, you do have some restrictions, but you don't have, like, for example, field level restrictions like you do in Dataverse standard. And like I said, that's a goal of ours. That's a direction we want to go in. And if you think about virtual tables themselves, they're actually very young. They first came out about 3 years ago when working between finance operations for Dynamics 365 and Dataverse and Power Apps. So when we started doing that correlation between those two, that's when virtual tables came about. And originally they were read-only. So in the span of 3 years, we went from this read-only process that was only for finance operations to being widely available to all users and making it a little bit easier and faster. And we'll continue to evolve and we'll continue to improve over time. And getting that feedback from MVPs and others on what makes the most sense to them, what's most important to them, help us drive those decisions. The whole idea of moving this and making it faster and easier is part of the feedback. And so security is a common request I've heard, and we are definitely looking into it. It's just a matter of time.
Okay. And really, you're talking about security from being able to utilize security of the source within your security model. Because right now it's, hey, that connector has whatever rights it has, all the rights it has, and you can apply some role based on top of that within CRM, but you can't like utilize the stuff that's already there. And that makes sense of why that would be a step a lot more complicated in order to be able to integrate that security in there. So totally makes sense. Now, back in the day, I remember Andrew Patenko had have a really good blog on this. Like you required to have a GUID column. Is that still a requirement? And if so, how do they get around that?
Basically, yes. And the reason I say basically is because when we think about this, that we have the three of our virtual connector providers today that work with us to speed this up, but the GUID is still a requirement of Dataverse. SharePoint already has a value that it considers a GUID, and when it passes over, the users don't have to do anything. SQL, as long as the user has a GUID or an integer-based primary column, it will treat it as if it is the GUID and be able to use it.
So it can work with integers now.
It can as long as
from when I last did it.
Yeah, it has to be the integer and the primary key, and then it will work. But then for Excel, it still has to be a GUID. And that's the tricky one because people don't put GUIDs in Excel too. So you have to, if you're going to use the Excel sheet as your basis and you want to connect a virtual table to it, you're going to have to insert GUIDs. And you might have to build a script to do that or use something else to populate that data in. But so GUID still is a hard requirement, and that's just because Dataverse as a structure relies on GUID. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I mean, it's integral to the architecture of Dataverse, and not to say that it couldn't change, but it's a big investment to make something like that change.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sorry, my mind was wandering when you started talking about Excel and GUIDs. It's just, could you use the TDS endpoint to query a SQL virtual table? It sounds kind of perverse, but
that's a good question. Honestly, I have not tried. It might be possible. I'd have to do some investigation to see what.
So I'm just thinking like a Power BI report, right, which uses direct query. It's kind of like it's going to query and join to some other Dataverse table through that TDS because the TDS endpoint seems to be sort of like more capable in terms of joins and stuff like that than standard fetch XML.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not sure what that limitation would be. So we'd have to check it out and see what's possible. I mean, I know that, for example, and this isn't TDS directly, but with the new functionality, you can actually use SQL views. So before it had to be a table. You could only use tables. With our new functionality, we unlock views. So you can say, I already have a SQL view that's got data, and I can build a table to that. It's read-only, but it's a table to that. And so,
that's cool.
TDS might be an interesting thing to investigate. I still don't have the answer. One other thing we unlocked as well as part of that, because it's super new because it's new everywhere, is Synapse. So people are using Synapse a lot to get that data lake data into a SQL table so they can use it. You can use our new feature to build a virtual table against a SQL Synapse table that's pulling data out of the table. So, not only is it available now in SQL for you, but you can build that virtual table and more easily integrate it into your apps and things without having to jump through a lot of use. And so that kind of opens up a lot of new ways to use that lake data as well.
No, that sounds good. Because I think a lot of times people have been a little bit reticent to use virtual tables because it seems like some kind of strange magic that's going on behind the scenes, and I'm not really sure. But it seems with the new wizard making it a lot easier, that's probably going to help things. But also out of the box, right? There's virtual tables being utilized already, so people are probably using virtual tables as it is in Dataverse.
Yeah. For example, I forget when it was. A few months ago, we released the AAD user virtual table, which basically pulls the AAD user information for your organization and makes that available as part of the app. And that's a virtual table. It's out of the box. We built the structure, but it allows people to utilize that as part of their functionality. And so they may not be aware they're using it. Honestly, often when people tell me they don't use virtual tables, the most common reasons I hear is, I don't know what a virtual table is. I've never heard of it before. Or I heard it was really hard to use and I couldn't figure out how to set this up. And then the third one, which is kind of funny, is people say they're read-only, aren't they? Actually, you've been able to do full CRUD operations on them for more than 2 years. When they first released, they were read-only, and so that might be some people's expectations that it's read-only because of that. But that's been, we've been able to have full CRUD for a while now. So some of these, so the limitation on, hey, I can't write my data, that no longer applies. But to get people so they're not, scared of them, or that they're aware of them as a viable opportunity for everybody, that's what we're really hoping that this brings. Is I've been putting out a bunch more content, not just on how to build them, but what they are and why you can use them. And so I'm going to be coming out with I have a video that's already out. I'm going to come out with a small series documentation that provides additional backup information to say, this is what they are, this is when you use them. And so people can become familiar with it. And then the same information that I'll be sharing guides them through how to create it, how to make relationships with it, how to build an app on it. And so, that way, people can just kind of say, hey, this is something that I can do. This is something that makes sense. And, I've even heard from other ISVs and MVPs that as soon as they show this to their customer's like, I want that. That's exactly what I need. And then the ISV is like, great, because this is going to take me like 5 minutes to set up, and it's not going to take me weeks and weeks to do. And it's like a win-win for everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, I have a client right now where they've got a Canvas app that's sitting on top of a on-premise SQL database. And there's a couple like admin screens I needed to create for them. I was like, oh, maybe we should just create the Dataverse and create the virtual tables, and you'll have much better experience of what I'm going to try to create in here, much faster and whatever else. And I haven't quite got them to buy into that. They're still kind of like, oh, no, we don't want another app, I think is what they were kind of worried about. But I don't know. Well, I'll get there. I'll get them drinking the Kool-Aid.
Well, I mean, from an administrative perspective, it's great because you could just say, well, I don't want to have to use, SQL Server Management Studio or Azure Data Studio or something like that to go and manually update all my data. I don't need a DBA to do that. I can just go and create a model-driven app on top of it.
Exactly, and since you're using it right out of the source, there's no delay, right? Because like if you're doing something where you do have to do those data syncs, you might have minutes up to hours to a full day delay before it syncs up the jobs. And so it's always, it pulls everything fresh every single time you access the table. And so you're always getting the most up-to-date data. So somebody changed it in SharePoint, and since you created the table, when you open it up and bring up the list again, it's brand new, even if you're in an app, right? So if you're in an app and you're editing a customer's profile and then you close it, somebody changes it in SharePoint, you open it up again, like right after that, and it has the data that they changed in SharePoint because it's all live and nothing is cached. And because it's not cached, it's more secure as well because there's no chance of data leakage.
Cool. So that's the two data sources we have today, SQL Server and Azure. SQL Server and SharePoint.
What about an AAD, right?
Yeah, and AAD, but I mean, there's the to-dos and there's the integration with to-dos and scheduler and stuff like that already as part of the Dynamics 365 extensions.
Yes, yeah, that's part of the first party app extensions there. We have
that's going through Graph, right? That's just like Graph queries.
Yeah, and you end up using Graph a lot in the actual application to build virtual tables. tables because that's how we know. Because when you log in, we say, hey, look at your AAD. Here's all of your SharePoint sites. Which one do you want to pick? So we make use of graph as well as our functionality. And also Excel. Excel, you can do that now with the 15-minute process, and within a few months, we're hoping that you'll be able to add that into this fast process. And again, it seems weird to pick Excel, but it's because of the usage volume, right? When we look at our usage volume, we looked at what are the top data sources that people use for virtual tables today, or to build apps on top of today, even to go that far. And SharePoint, SQL, Dataverse, and Excel are the top. And so, we attacked those first just because that has the largest volume of users, but we're not drawing the line there. That's where our MVP, our phase one. And I kind of sense the question that's kind of looming there in the background, which is, what else are we going to get? When do we get it, and what are we going to do? And that's that. We have a list. Part of that list is, again, looking deeper into that list of common use connections, and then also customer feedback. So, one we hear a lot, and I'll call it out here because I know if there are certain MVPs watching this right now, they're going to be saying it out loud themselves while they're watching this. What about Dataverse to Dataverse? Because every presentation I hear it from at least a couple of people, and it makes sense because it's a really it makes a lot of sense to have that for certain uses and for certain enterprises, and that is on our list. I don't have a date for you, but that is one of the ones that we're looking at. There have been requests for other things like SAP or SQL. Not SQL, I'm sorry, Oracle. Or MySQL. So Snowflake is another one people ask for a lot. So we have a lot of customer, excitement. So now they see what we can do. How do I do it for other sources? And so we're doing some investigation on that. Right now, our primary focus is relational tables on a table-to-table basis. And so that's easier for us to accomplish. Something like, going for SAP is a little tougher because it has a different structure. It's like you have an entity that references multiple tables to put data in, and so it's not a one-to-one match. So while we do want to deliver that, it takes a little bit more effort for us to work out the logistics of how to make that work. And so we are investigating a number of other different sources, and there will be some extension of different connectors as virtual connector providers in the future. And once we have more information, we'll definitely make people aware of which ones are coming and when. So it's continuing to move forward. It will continue to evolve. It's kind of like, is it Stephen who always says, "In the fullness of time."
In the fullness of time, yes.
We will have more coverage, and we will.
We've all got the t-shirts. Yeah.
I love how you so eloquently described the SAP stuff, when really the answer is it's a lot harder than it looks. That's why it's not there. That's really what you're saying there. Yeah. And so and we definitely want to, and that's why people want it, right? People want it because it's hard. If I could do this easily myself, but it's like I said, it's on our list of investigation. It's on our list to see if that's something we can do, and when we have more information about that, we will share that, and people will be more aware of what we can do.
Because it's the discovery of the metadata about a particular data source, I think, is obviously going to be the challenge, and consistency. Is there any plans to create like a open API type connector style integration? So, obviously we've got all these however many thousand connectors there are. That is part of the discussion. Is there a way to make this so that it's more genericized? And so, right now we're building these individual plugin type structures to be able to talk to everything. But can we make it so at a base level we can do the basics? And that's kind of part of the investigation as well. Is, rather than having to build a custom connector for every one of these connectors, like a virtual connector provider, could we make something that most or a good portion of them can just reuse? And that'll be part of that investigation.
I think if you do that, you need to call it either the Star Trek connector or the Universal Communicator, because they're like space aliens that never seen each other. Oh, I'll just give you all the information and we're sending it to you. And like, what does that happen? Like, what? Probably like storing it in like a try numbering system rather than binary or something. Who knows? Like, what this is? Yeah, give me a break.
We don't even understand each other's acronyms, honestly. So, let alone full data sets.
They're probably still using XML over there or something.
Yeah, I love the fact that in Doctor Who, all the aliens have a northern accent. So it's it's like I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and it's just like, oh, it's interesting. Everyone in the universe is comes from up north. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly for me. That's one of the things that I get asked a lot. Is like, can we make virtual connectors talk to my back end, my proprietary back end? It's yes. We've got a web API, we've got an OData endpoint. How and it's very difficult to say, well, it's going to take this amount of time to do it because of all the nuances that you were just sort of saying. It's
yeah. So and that's kind of what our hope is if we could make it so there's at least a base functionality through some way of having like a standard OData structure, and then you can do a read, you can do a write. You might not have all the specific details, all the fancy features, but if we could do that and expedite some of that's definitely something we'd like to do. And that's kind of like where we're doing those trade-offs, right? Where people saying, well, we want to have all of this other functionality, and so trying to balance that. Say, okay, well, do we focus on specific connectors for specific purposes? Do we focus more on generic functionality that can be universally applied to a larger portion of users? That's kind of the discussions that we have during our design phases and our planning phases to figure out what's next.
Cool.
Yeah, sounds good.
So is there anything else that you can share with us publicly? Obviously, we like being MVPs. Anything else you can share with us publicly that is coming down the pipe, or anything else before we start to wrap it up?
I mean, for virtual tables, I just said, we just had a bunch of different things that came out, like improvements that came out that people may not have seen. It happened right around the holidays, so a lot of people missed those. AAD user tables used to not be able to customize which columns were present, and you couldn't build your own forms and views on those. You can do that now. That is live. It used to be when you had a virtual table to a SharePoint list, you couldn't use the multi-select capability. For some reason, it just didn't work, and we fixed all of that. So now, option sets, multi-select, everything, you filter, it all works fine. So, we made some definite improvements there to help people out. And then otherwise, it's just, right now, the stuff that's more public is just, if you need to learn more about it, there's going to be more content and more information to make it clear, what they are, how to use them, when it's a benefit to you, and trying to give some more tangible examples for people to kind of take that information and then see how they can apply it other places. Anything else, it'll be in the release notes when we have a more solid idea of what's coming out. And so, like I said, I'm totally fine saying investigating things, and we've got a plan to do some of this stuff, but we can't talk more about any specifics unless it's a little bit more live.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, awesome. Well, Nathan, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing in virtual tables. And for our listeners out there, I think the big takeaway here is if you've used it before, you may want to look at it again because they've done a lot of changes. If you're back in the day of like, last time I used it was read only, maybe go back and look at it again because there's been a lot of work that's been done. A lot of features have been improved, and I'm sure a lot of cliffs that have now been removed. So you don't have to worry about, I got this far and I can't use it because of X, Y, Z. And if there are questions that you happen to have or things that you're hoping to be in there, Nathan, is there a way for them to get a hold of you or to suggest to the product team?
Well, for the product team, using the community is always a great way. If you go on the community, if you use the ideas forum and other things, we pull from that whenever I do my planning, every cycle I do my planning, it's not only what are people contacting me about directly, what is the data telling me, but also what are people posting on ideas. And, it's like some of those fixes we just pushed out, a lot of that came from the ideas community of people complaining stuff wasn't working. So that's one way. I'm on LinkedIn. I always am posting new stuff about virtual tables and data model. So, you can feel free to look there for updates and information, but also contact me. I'm more than happy to receive questions and contacts that way as well. And then if we need to more formalize it, maybe suggest then you might take it to the community or such. But if people just have some general questions, any of the folks who are watching this who have already reached out to me can justify or can say that, I respond. Sometimes it might take a little while, depending on how busy I am, but I definitely am totally open to open questions and feedback and comments, and that just helps me talk better.
And Scott, we're up to like 12 listeners, right? So, I mean, he could have 12 people contacting him this weekend, right?
Exactly. You'll be inundated. Nice. Yeah. I mean, your mailbox will be full.
Block off my calendar.
We've got. I keep on finding people that are even this week I reached out to somebody and they're like, "Oh, I'm a XRM Toolcast listener." I put the two and two together. I was like, "Oh, wow, cool!" And it's always great running into people out in the wild. And
the number just went up. Wow,
the number went up. Yes. It's a slow, never-ending, gradual increase here. So yeah, but unfortunately, the number of dad jokes as that increases, maybe our viewership decreases. I don't know what.
Yeah.
See, wow. This is a rather dad joke heavy episode. So
no apologies. No apologies.
Well, Nathan, thank you for your time. I appreciate that. So, Scott, if our guests want to get hold of Nathan, that sounds like LinkedIn's a great option for that. If our listeners want to get hold of us, how do they do that, Scott?
Well, Daryl, you can get hold of us virtually through any channel. So, sorry. Cast@xrmtoolbox.com, email, or on social media @xrmtoolcast. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us off about terrible jokes. But Nathan, it's been fantastic to have you.
Yes,
and thank you ever so much for all you're doing in this area. It's really exciting to see where Virtual Tables is going.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out and talk about it. So honestly, I can talk for hours on the subject. So I'm glad that you gave me this opportunity, and I'm glad to hear that you're liking the features. And I again, thank you for all the feedback that everybody gives, and then helps make these features better.
Awesome. Thank you too. Well, great talk to you. We will see you later.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.
This has been the XRM Toolcast with Daryl and Scott Darrell, produced by Lynn Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com, tweet @xrmtoolcast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn XRM Toolcast page.